So a couple things. I mentioned during the morning session that there were some web resources for evidence-based practices and that I would look them up for you during lunch. So I found 3 of them real quick and put the website up here. Is that really clear? Yep. I thought it looked a little fuzzy. Okay, the first one is the What Works Clearinghouse, and this is on the Department of Education website. It's www.whatworks.ed.gov. The second one is a progress monitoring website. It's funded through the Department of Education. And that one is www.studentprogress.org. They also have lots of ideas for how to do progress monitoring if you're looking for some fun little tools or ideas. And the last one is probably the website that I use the most often. It's the Universal Design for Learning website, and that's www.cast.org. Oh, I can take off all my little paragraph markers too. So those are some 3 websites that you can use to locate some evidence-based practices and ideas. You had about 45 minutes that you could sit and think about things from the morning. So I wanted to know if anybody had any questions or anything they wanted to talk about right after lunch. And I see a hand already.
How do you decide which behavior tool you're going to use? So for example, I have a student who the teacher said that the target behaviors that she wants to work on are what I need to collect data. She agrees with. So she says he's running and he's interrupting. So how do I know if I'm going to do a data collection tool for frequency or duration?
What was the second thing he was doing?
Interrupting.
Interrupting, okay. That's a very good question. So you want to know whether it's frequency or duration. I would say that you need to consider what would be the most helpful for you. So if running is happening a lot and short periods of time, then frequency may be a little more useful. If you're talking about the student takes off once or twice a day, then duration may be a little more helpful. So you might want to look at how often it is happening. If you're not sure, you might collect both and see. Oh, interrupting. Usually that would be a frequency because I think it would be the occurrence. If I'm interrupting you, it's not going to last too long usually. I would say frequency might be a little better. So you need to think about kind of what might be the most helpful for you in terms of data. If the interruption goes on and disrupts the class for a long period of time, then duration may be more helpful. But I would think with interruption, the frequency might be a little more helpful. Does that answer your question or no?
Well, kind of. How do you determine is my biggest thing. Because sometimes it is one, it is the other. And then
yeah.
I want to come in because this is a teacher who was a little resistant at first to having, it's just, he does this, we don't have to collect data, but I know I'm going to teach it forever. So that she said, yeah, she'll collect data, so I don't want to come in like, oh, we did this, and it didn't really come out, let's try this. Because I know what her reaction is going to be. So I'm trying to prevent, I want to come in and make sure that the one that we have is going to give us a pretty good picture. Instead of saying, oh, I'm sorry, I picked the wrong one. Not that, it happens, but some people aren't as receptive.
Well, when you do duration, you are also going to get frequency because every time the student engages in the behavior, you're you're going to have different start and end times, so you'll have a frequency at the same time. So that will give you both that you can use, even though you'll really be logging when they start and end the behavior. As far as decision making, some of it you just kind of have to go with what you think is going to be the most helpful for you. There's no cut and dry, this is exactly when you use event, this is exactly when you use duration, this is exactly when you do latency. It depends on really what it is that you're looking for. But if you're deciding between frequency and duration, duration may be more useful because you'll get the duration, but you'll also have a tally because every time that behavior happens, you're going to log when it starts and stops. So you'll still have your frequency. Yes?
I'm wondering too, is like, is that a situation where you might get more information from doing like the ABC, where you're looking at what's the antecedent, then where's the talking out, and what happens after that, rather than just a straight count or duration? Because when you're thinking about your interventions, you're also going to be thinking about, well, you know, in some ways that's what the function of this is. Is the child altered or not, or is it something being asked of them or not, or is it attention, whatever. So I'm just wondering if that would be a better monitoring.
That's a very good question. Because that why is the critical piece of the behavior. Why is it happening? What's the student getting out of it? Yes?
If it's a teacher where there's resistance and you're trying to win her over, okay, what I would do is sit down and talk to her and listen as best you can to what is it that's really bothering her the most. And even if my judgment is that that's not the most important thing, I would go with what she presents as the problem that she's most concerned with to begin with, because that's a way of winning her over. And you can't spread yourself too thin or try this and then it doesn't work and then you try that. But if you start with the thing that she's most invested in trying to change and you get somewhere, then you could maybe move on to something that you think is really the problem or some other issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and really, I mean, that's a really good point, is having that sort of relationship with the teacher as well. But because behavior management, talking about preventing behaviors and doing interventions, it's not an exact science. So there's no guarantee that even when you put in an intervention that it's going to work. It could make the behavior worse. So having a good relationship with the teacher helps too. I know it's not always easy. Any other burning questions? None? Okay. So going back to, I want to go back a little bit to PBIS because I learned over lunch that several of you work in schools that implement PBIS, so it'd be awesome to hear your examples or any experiences that you have with that. So first, let's do a little frequency or tally. How many of you work in schools or work with PBIS? Wow, that's almost everybody, a good chunk. Anybody want to share an experience with PBIS? It could be good or bad.
Our school's first attempt at PBIS was giving teachers a plastic pencil box with some stickers and erasers in it. And that was it. That was the whole sum. It was our high school, yeah. That was the
Oh, wow.
But then they actually got the training, and now we actually they're using the Swiss data system. They're gathering the information they're on the tier 2. They have a check-in, check-out. We have the tier 1, so we're on the way.
Excellent. So is
Better
this
than the pencil box.
the second year or the third year?
This is the second try.
Okay.
So the first time was, I don't know, 8 years ago or so.
Okay.
This is the second try.
Excellent. Well, see, so maybe things are improving.
We're hoping.
Any other experiences with PBIS people want to share?
I
don't know how, I think my school's been doing it for 4 years or 5 years now. And when we first started, I have junior high, so I had 8th graders, and they did not buy into it at all. They hated it. They thought it was ridiculous. We gave them dirks and dollars. So we were just like, well, our 8th grade team was kind of like, well, 8th graders just don't like it. In my district, they're just too cool for it, whatever. But now after 5 years, and we would have a lot of the, positive things that they could earn, their rewards, would be like an after-school social like type activity. There'd be like 500 6th graders, 500 7th graders, 2 8th graders attending because it wasn't cool. But now, like last year at the end of the year, we had, after it's been implemented for this many years and we've continued and collected the data and stuff, those kids who started it as 6th graders, and everybody knows it's kind of the school community now, it helps. But it does apply sometimes to my specific behavior kids, because we can take the data for the school, and I just know specifically one time we had a parent and said, well, everybody at your school does that, all the kids do it, and we could show data and say, actually, for our referrals to the office, this is how many, this is the percentage, and your student, this is his percentage, your child. So just to be able to use it to compare your specific behavior students to the school community has been a positive for us too.
That's great.
After the implementation has been working after several years, and then two, it works when you're making behavior plans and trying to, if the kids buy into it already, specific students can work, the positive stuff can work for them.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, do you find that 6th and 7th graders really buy into it, and then by 8th grade they're tired of it and they don't want it anymore? Have you found a way to mitigate that?
Well, to solve that, what they started to do is 8th grade specific only rewards, and it's hard because there's teams that have to come up with what is these rewards, then implement it and do all the legwork for it. So one of the things they did was change the rewards when it gets to 8th grade so that it's something 8th graders will more likely buy into, and it becomes different, and let the 8th graders have more say in what reward it is. So with the 6th and 7th graders, they'll just kind of do whatever. They'll collect their dirks and dollars. It's cool to have the big pile of them. For 8th graders, they even kind of found just even having the dirks and dollars on your person was not cool.
Yeah.
So having an immediate reward for 8th graders where you could turn them in right now at this time, if they were collected during the class period, turn them in right now at this time, maybe even if it's just turn them in and saving them towards something, you turned in 20 from this class, so you get marked as 20, so then you don't have to hold the dirks and dollars.
Okay.
Just modify it for them so that it's cool.
That's great. So it's like a bank account for them.
Yeah.
They can deposit their dollars.
Yes.
That's excellent. Yes.
I work in a high school as well as a middle school, and one of the things that's really helped with the higher functioning high school kids to kind of buy into it is, because a lot of my students don't have a lot of means, is to work within the school to also be able to, so that they can earn tickets to purchase things like homecoming t-shirts, the week spirit week of homecoming, which is kind of a big ticket item, but they're very, very motivated to be able to have an opportunity to get something that everyone else in the building typically can get pretty easily, but for them it would really be difficult. And that's just changed the whole way that they think about it. They're very
Wow.
motivated and they bought into it very positively.
That's great. Yes.
I work in high school too, and we added different things to our store of things that they could buy, like cookies and candy and chips, drinks, things that they're always hungry. High schoolers are always hungry, so that's a big motivator is real food. And then having the interpreters, they don't necessarily, for our mainstream students, they don't hand it to the students, their dollars or whatever, they don't hand it to them in the classroom, but they might write the student's name on it and put it in their pocket and give it to the student later when they see them in our classroom area, because they know the students don't want to get it out in the mainstream because it's not a school-wide thing, it's just
Okay.
a program thing. But yeah, having a real food, and then also creating a high school goal that all the students decide on, something that they want to do, like having a game day or a movie day, and then they have that goal of 1,000 tickets or whatever to work toward. But they do put their tickets in, they have maybe like a shoe holder type thing almost, and each student has a pocket. And it's in our classroom, it's not out in the mainstream anywhere, and then they can put it in their pocket anytime throughout the day. Some kids will hold it in their wallet until they've got a ton, but we count them up weekly, and the kids know that, so they try to put them in.
Oh, that's great. My school, a couple of the rewards that we had for PBIS was one that was really popular was PE for a whole day. And I had students who saved up all their merits so that they could have PE for a whole day. That one was a big one. Another one, they could earn tickets to the dances. So we charge for the school dances. So like you said, some students can't afford it. So they could earn a free ticket to go to the dance and socialize, which is nice. Another thing that we did, I really am not sure about how effective this was, but we had drawings every quarter for prizes, and some of the prizes were really good. I mean, I think once in a while we had some iPods that were given away. I mean, those were prizes that I would have worked for. But there were often gift certificates, so restaurants, local restaurants would donate gift certificates, or we would get money from places that we could buy some gift certificates, and the students could get. Is that me? Okay. They had iTunes gift certificates, so they could purchase music, or they could go to a restaurant or go to the movies even. So some of those were things, and we did it once a quarter, so any student who used their merits for anything would then get put into the drawing, and then it was done by grade level.
I work pre-K through 12, but the middle school that I primarily work at, they have a mystery field trip where they have to have like 4,000 central cash to go on this mystery field trip, and nobody knows what it is. I mean, one year they went to the Burlington Bees baseball game. They've been on the riverboat. They've done all kinds of stuff, but
Cool.
since nobody knows, I mean, it's a big, big deal.
Oh, very cool. Mystery is always good.
Our school does it in name only, so there's a poster in each room, and that's all the school does. And unfortunately, 2 weeks ago, a lady with a clipboard came around and quizzed kids about what are the 3 B's, what are the 3 B's. And my kids saw her doing that in the library, and they're like, she doesn't know sign language, you know. And they were so lucky that she didn't know sign language. But I'm thinking, what a negative. It's supposed to be a positive, and you just turned it into a huge negative, because now my kids are scared of the lady with the clipboard. And she didn't ask a question about the yellow poster.
Wow.
It's really poorly done.
Was it a PBIS person?
Yeah, they call it the PBIS police when the kids at. Police. That's what she is.
Wow.
She doesn't know sign language.
Wow, you really don't want PBIS and police right next to each other. Wow, okay, so yeah, that really makes a challenge when you don't really have a whole lot of intervention going on and it doesn't feel like there's consistency. Do you think that there'll be any changes to come from it?
I don't know. I just know there's a poster in every room. I know more about it just from training. But really in that school, there's just a poster in each room. Be responsible, be respectful, be safe. That's it.
Wow.
Okay, and I have a question, and there might be a second question, depending on how you answer it. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm a little bit confused. So the PBIS it's not an all-school thing. It's just for the students with behavioral problems?
No, it is an all-school thing. Every child in the school.
So every child can be, so that you guys could potentially give away a lot of free shirts.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right, then never mind, I don't have a second question.
Okay,
It doesn't have to be free shirt. It can be
Right.
homework pads.
No, I know it's relative to whatever, but I just, like I said, I was just thinking about, basically my second question would have been if it was just for the kids with behavioral issues, in a way that's kind of isolating them. I know it's giving them positive reinforcement for them behaving well, but for example, if I was somebody who I knew I had a behavioral problem. And I'm in a class with a bunch of people who don't, and then I'm being seen as giving these rewards. I might not want to get the rewards because everybody else might not know that I might have an issue, or, you know what I mean? I was going to see how you dealt with that question.
Well, we actually had sort of the problem where it really was, at least in my school, where it was lopsided, where the kids who had the behavior problems or who were viewed as the behavior problems were really getting the bulk of the merits. And so, you know, you might have a kid who's always in the principal office, and all of a sudden that kid won an iPod, you know? So you feel a little conflicted because it's supposed to be this reward for wonderful behavior, but maybe yesterday that kid got into a fight in the hallway. So it's a real sort of challenge for how you balance that out. But there, I mean, like I said, we had students who were always doing what they were supposed to be doing, and they saw the kids who were not doing what they were supposed to be doing getting more merits than they were, and that was a real sticky issue that we had to be aware of. So I think it's just a lot of monitoring and making sure that things are done fairly.
In the beginning, when we first started talking about it, I did think you were talking about a school-wide thing, but then when I started hearing some of the rewards, and then we were seeing the chart where 80% of the people, that's a lot of iPods you could be giving out. I mean, that's gonna. I just was like, wait, maybe it's not that. But.
No, it could be it could be every student in the school. So in theory, if you have something like gym for a day, PE for a day, and the kids really want that, you could, in theory, have 800 kids doing PE all day long. I mean, realistically, will it happen? No, because you're not going to have 800 kids who want to do it, and they won't have their merits all done at the same time. But, I mean, yeah, and the school has to be ready to assume the cost for it, because if you're giving away T-shirts, that has a real cost associated with it. And I think if you join the PBIS group, I think there might be some money that comes with it, but I cannot say for sure because I was not involved with that. But there might be, because I'm not sure how else we managed to get some of the things that we got. Any other comments or questions?
Just one thing I want to say about PBIS is I think that my understanding of it is, you know, we get hung up on the rewards, or the kids are getting rewarded for everything that, you know, in some ways we have expectations of them doing. A big part of that is the training of staff, so that they are really mindful of things that they can do that will connect them to the students in not tangible ways, you know, monitoring the hallways, getting to know the kids, talking to them by names, so that you are really changing the climate of the community. And so that to me was always a bigger piece of that, and the more difficult piece, quite honestly. Because like it's been said, not everybody buys into that, but I think what the literature tells you is that if that is done, that is going to help and reduce referrals and reduce the need for other behavioral type of intervention. So that's, I think, is a piece that's worth looking at on that side, or that, because they have a lot of good ideas for that.
And it can't just be one-time training, because in my school I know it was one time at the beginning of the year, and that was all we got. But it needs to be continual throughout the year, and you need to be talking about it. So thank you for bringing that up.
I was just going to say, our team, there's like one person per grade level, and they do trainings with their group, you know, all throughout the year. But also, I mean, we train the students too on the purpose of the program and, you know, the goals that you're supposed to be attaining behavior-wise. So that way, you know, one of the things, like you said, you know, somebody's getting a whole bunch of checks and dollars for something and somebody else is not. You know, we teach them, sometimes it's a snapshot. You look around the classroom and you're rewarded for doing what you're supposed to be doing. Sometimes it's, you know, specific to a person. It can be different, all you know. So the kids they're trained too. So it's the adults and the kids throughout the year being trained.
That's true too. That's very true. The kids always, it's not fair, but trying to understand what fair means.
Right.
All done with PBIS? Okay, so then we'll move on to classroom level systems. I call it a classroom management system because it's what happens within the classroom. And like I said before, love letters, so CMS. But a classroom management system, it's a comprehensive plan for your classroom that's designed so that you can maximize instruction and minimize the disruptions. So some tips for establishing a classroom management system. The first is you have to be willing to put in the time up front. You have to be willing very early in the school year to teach what it is that your management system is. And sometimes I know like we want to jump in, we have curriculum we have to teach, there's standards to meet, there's testing coming up, but it's still really important that the tone is set for the school year. A general rule of thumb is to focus on positive behavior. So for every negative behavior you're going to address, it's nice to have 3 positives. It's really hard sometimes, but sometimes all you need to do is, hey, I like that shirt. You know, it's so simple, but sometimes that's where you have to go. But focusing on positive things, or, you know, hey, you just sat down, thank you. Or you're looking at me, great. Teach well. That refers to both teaching the classroom management system and to the curriculum. If you have things that are designed to engage students, then they'll be less likely to disrupt the classroom. And I see a hand up.
I was going to say, I observed a classroom, she's a master teacher or whatever, and she was giving a test to the class, and I know the class has a lot of different kids in there. And she just put her expectations of sit in your seat, have your feet, I mean, like everything that she expected during a test, she went over them, they read them, and then they took the test. And she does it before every test. And I'm just like, wow. I mean, so kids knew. And there were several behavior problems that kids but I want just behaviors before a test, really?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, any kind of behavior that you expect, you need to teach it to students. You can't assume that they know anything, that they know exactly what you want from them. So providing supports too. So like you said, the teacher has the visual of what she expects. That's providing a visual support, a visual cue for the students so that they have a little reminder of what's expected of them. One is to be educative and not vindictive. I mean, sometimes students needle us, and they really just know exactly what button to push that will just set us off the edge. But it's really important that we need to use those moments as teachable moments and really think about how it is that we need to instruct the student in their behavior and not how we would like to react. And I mean, I'm a Scorpio, so it's really very much in my nature to be like that. So sometimes I have to step back and take a deep breath and think about how is it that I need to respond appropriately. And then the last is to be persistent and consistent. So you need to constantly reinforce the rules. So like you said, every time the students take a test, they get instruction on how it is that they're expected to sit, how it is that they're expected to behave, and you have to be consistent. So if one student is not sitting up like the way that they're supposed to be, then you need to make sure that you reinforce that that's what they should be doing. So, a few resources on different behavior approaches. You may be familiar with these. One that I particularly like is Harry and Rosemary Wong. They wrote the book that's up here, The First Days of School. And their focus in the book is on using procedures and routines to teach responsibility. So they really emphasize that the very first days of school can make or break your entire year. So how you set up your classroom, the tone, the climate, your expectations, that can make or break how the rest of your year will go. And they are all about establishing very clear rules, routines, procedures, and consequences, and then teaching the students how to follow the rules, what do the rules look like, what are the rewards, what are the consequences, and practice, practice, practice. With a little bit of a caveat, which is sometimes when you're practicing behaviors, so for example, if you're practicing how to line up in the hallway and walk to a special, and the students don't do it right, you make them go back and do it again, and you might have to do that several times. Well, for some students, that's reinforcing because they're missing out on academic instruction, and they don't want that. They're trying to avoid that, so they'll act up intentionally so they don't have to do the academic part of that, or they don't have to do the activity that they don't want to engage in. So it's important to make sure that this doesn't backfire on you. So if you notice that you have 1 or 2 students who are acting up just to avoid an activity, you may want to pull them to the side, let the other students practice. They can go on to the next thing, and you can address the behavior with those students. Another person is Fred Jones. He has several books and a website, which is fredjones.com. And he focuses on teaching responsibility. What Fred Jones found in his research is that there are 6 characteristics of effective teachers. The first is that they don't allow students to waste time, and they themselves don't waste time. The effective teachers set limits on behavior, so exactly what's acceptable and what's not. They don't nag. I mean, I often want to be like, come on, just do it, and keep telling the student to do it, but he says effective teachers don't do that. Sometimes they'll use body language, you know, when you give a child the look, and then they straighten right up. That kind of thing is what teachers will do. Keep students actively engaged in learning. So if they're active and they're involved and they're engaged in what it is that they're learning, they're less likely to have time or energy to focus on disrupting the class. He suggests providing incentives judiciously, so it's not that every 2 minutes I'm going to pass out candy to everybody or I'm going to pass out dollars to everybody. I'm just going to do it at times that seem appropriate. Maybe if there's a transition that I think, ooh, this could go a little crazy because we have to move desks or chairs around, and it goes really smoothly, then maybe I'll provide an incentive. And one of the big things he found was that effective teachers provide help efficiently during independent work. And it's really interesting because he found that when he talked with teachers about how long are they working with students, so if all the students are on independent work and I'm going around and helping, how much time am I spending with each student? And the teachers say, oh, 1 or 2 minutes. And he found that, in fact, it was actually much longer that they were spending with each student. And they weren't getting around to every student. And then while I'm busy working with one student and I'm working with that one student for a long time, that leaves more opportunity for the other students to disengage with the activity. So he provides some ideas for how to move around quickly. And the last one, he's probably not as well known as the first 2. But his ideas are just as well known. This is William Glasser, and he is a big proponent of choice theory. So in choice theory, there's 3 areas of focus. The first is that the curriculum should be genuinely attractive to students. There should be something that says, you know what, I really want to learn this. This is really fascinating to me. I want to learn it. use non-coercive discipline that helps students make responsible choices. So basically what you're saying is, look, here are your choices. This one might be a better one. You talk about the consequences of each choice, and you're really helping students develop that sort of internal, all right, here are my choices. This is going to have a negative outcome. This one's going to have a positive outcome. Which one should I do? And then his emphasis is on quality in all aspects of teaching and learning. So even though we talk a lot about behavior management as separate from the curriculum and separate from teaching the content itself, they actually are very much intertwined, so that if I have very engaging activities and the content is interesting to my students, then they are less likely to act up in class, and I'll have fewer behavior problems. And that's a challenge sometimes. I mean, everybody has different interests, and everybody has different things that they really want to learn about. So for me, maybe sitting in a science class and learning about space is something that is really engaging to me, but then I go to history and I have to learn about the Civil War, and that's not so much fun. But how am I going to stay interested in both? And that's a real challenge. So I just bring those people up just so you have a few more resources. If there's a particular approach that you're interested in learning more about, then you at least have a few people that you can go and look up. Any questions or discussion on those people so far? Any other authors that you particularly like as far as behavior management? Doesn't everybody read behavior management books in their spare time? Randy Springer? Oh, Sprit. I don't know that material. Can you tell me more about it?
Sure. It's CHAMP stands for Communication, Assistance, etc., Movement of the Students, and it defines each of those and gives icons in the back of the book for classroom management and lesson plans on how to plan for the type of activities that you want, and when you want students to go to the pencil sharpener, or when you don't want them to go to the pencil sharpener, when they can talk to their peers, when it's quiet, you know, those kinds of things.
Fantastic. I'm looking that one up. Any others? Okay. So the elements of setting up a classroom management plan or classroom management system. First is to consider the physical environment. So the classroom should be a friendly, welcoming place. You want students to want to be in there, maybe not to run away or not to come in at all. So some guidelines. Oh. Okay, so for the guidelines, you want to ensure that you're able to monitor the students at all times. So sometimes I've seen classrooms where maybe there's a bookshelf, like the little library is in a little corner of the room. But if you're in the library, then you're not able to see everything that's happening, but you always need to see everything that's happening in the classroom, because you never know who's going to do something they're not supposed to do. Consider the flow of traffic in the classroom. I'm not sure about you guys, but I usually like to move around. I'm not moving around too much today, but I usually like to move around the classroom. So you want to think about what are some good traffic patterns when the students are asked to move around the classroom. What is that flow of traffic going to look like? How does moving around look? Some teachers spend some time during the first couple weeks to train their students how, if they're sitting in something like rows like this, how do you move your desk into a group situation, and they practice doing it, and they practice doing it quietly And so some of those are things that help to improve the flow. You want to minimize distractions. So things could be the door being open, especially if you're teaching. I personally don't like any kind of distraction from the hallway coming in, but especially when you have lunch bells going on, if you're teaching a class and you have different lunch periods and the kids are in the hallway coming to or from lunch, that causes an awful lot of distraction. AC or heat vents, sometimes we don't think about how much noise those put off, but it does interfere with our students' ability to listen. And that goes for deaf and hearing students. I mentioned to some people earlier, my brother has an auditory processing disorder. So even though he's hearing, when he gets into a classroom with lots of background noise, he can't process the language that's coming in. Pencil sharpeners, I've already mentioned that one several times. You need to make sure that students have access to the teaching area. So thinking about where is it that the lesson's going to happen, how are the students going to be able to see and engage with what's happening in the teaching area. So it could be up here at the front, or maybe you have something going on in the middle of the room and students are looking at, or story time. You often have the story and the kids are sitting on the floor. So thinking about some of those things. And then you can ignore the parentheses on the last one. I actually have a classroom management project that some of my students do. And they have to talk about where they're putting their agenda and their objectives, because students should understand what is it that they're going to do every day. It's called a no secrets classroom, where you let them know up front, here's today's agenda, and here's what you're going to learn, and this is what I expect you to do. And so having that in a nice visible place for students is really important. Oh, I also want, related to the agenda and the objectives, I also found for my students, reviewing them at the beginning of class was very helpful, because if they really struggled to read, they might not understand what was posted up on the board. So we would review it. It also helped to reduce anxiety, because students would often come into my class, what are we doing today? What are we doing today? And so if you direct them to say, hey, look at that, and then talk about it, then they're put at ease about what it is that's going to happen in class. So the next thing is routines. Establishing classroom procedures from day one. It's a part of being proactive, because if everybody knows what the routine is, then things run a little smoother, and then you don't have to respond to things that come up behaviorally. One of my personal routines was when homework was due, students would either come in and try and hand it to me, or they would, I really hated it, but they would try and put it on my desk, and I was like, oh, you cannot put anything on my desk. I had a little homework bin, and so I had to teach my students that when they came in and they had homework, they had to put it into the bin. So then they knew that's where homework went, and I told them if it went on my desk or in my hands, I could not promise that it would ever be seen again. The routines need to be practiced to mastery. So again, like I said, when you're doing the lineup, students may act up just so they can avoid having to do the academic work. And this is important for secondary students too. So now I want you to think about what are some routines that require teaching early in the year. Anything that you care to share? Yes.
I'm an itinerant, so one of the things for the middle school kids is that they come and see me during a certain period, that they have to let their teacher know before they come. And so a lot of times they'll come to me, and then the teacher knows that I go back. And they have to do that several times in the room, so it's just a routine. And then they get to the point where they first will go to their teacher, and then they
Okay, so teaching them to let the teacher know before they go to see you. Very good.
What does it mean to be prepared for each class and in different classes? What does that mean?
What does it mean to be prepared for different classes?
I share a classroom with another teacher, so we really had to teach what the procedures were for moving from one side of the classroom to another, where you walk so that you're not disrupting the other class. Because to get to the door, you have to go to the other side. So
Oh, wow.
how are you going to walk? Where are you going to walk? Things like that we had to practice very early on.
Yeah, boy, that's tough. Okay, so you have to train the kids when you're sharing classroom how they move from one part of the classroom to another without disrupting the other class.
This is my first year as an itinerant. I was always self-contained prior, and along with students coming to me, some of my littler kids or some of my more low-functioning older kids that I pick up from their classroom teacher how to appropriately leave the classroom, such as peace out is not acceptable to the classroom, screaming that across the place, or just not making eye contact with me means you're not going to have to go. I will come in and get you, so you need to just, get up and leave quickly and quietly and not interrupt the class, or, whatever procedure it is for that specific kid for that picking up.
Very good. So teaching them how to leave appropriately and come in appropriately too, because sometimes they'll come in, hey!
Yeah.
Others?
I know this is going to sound crazy, but I've always had my students line up in ABC order, class name, birth. But our whole school did that, and so this was the first year that our entire school, as directed by our principal, every class has to now line up in ABC order because there was so much just chaos. Who was going to be first? Who's going to, it was just chaos. So now everybody, no matter where we are, the only time you don't have to is for a fire drill, obviously. But that is the rule now school-wide.
Okay, so lining up in a particular order.
But that takes a lot of practice.
Right, you have to learn your place in line. Are you in elementary or are you? Okay. So when you have littler kids, probably takes a lot of effort to figure out.
Last name, not their first name. So even that is very crazy. So.
I'm a Y. I had to be at the end.
I was thinking about, you were talking for the independent work, how to ask for help when it is independent work time, because then so often if you have 2 minutes with one student and you get interrupted 3 minutes, that 2 minutes was really ineffective. So during that independent work time, what you should be doing, how to ask for help, a couple of different strategies that I've seen work is 1, 2, 3, then me. You have to try 3 other ways to get help before you can come interrupt the teacher. And then another one of those 1, 2, 3 strategies was the yellow pages. So at the beginning of the year, you kind of went around your class and identified who was kind of your guru, or who, what are the strengths of each of the students in the classroom, and they got to put their name up on the yellow pages with their specialties. So that if you were working on math and you needed help with addition or fractions or whatever, you could go to kind of your classroom guru on the yellow pages to get help from that student.
That's great. I haven't seen the yellow pages. I used to have a toilet paper roll that had half red and half green, and if the students needed help, then they would have the red side up, and they would continue working while and then I would come to them when I saw that they had their little flag up. There's lots of little things you can do. I like the yellow pages. Do they even know what yellow pages are anymore?